This is Steve Arnold. We know how to do bumper music here, and we're back with more vital issues for you. I have tried to put together a compilation of some very interesting information here because this gutsy term has gotten to me heavy. I can't deny it. Our president went out roughly a week ago, and he gave, I think, the worst speech of his entire career in the White House thus far. And this speech was all about himself, which, of course, to him is his most important criteria. That's his most important objective. Everything, and remember this for the next year and a half as this campaign, which is going to take too long and which we are all going to be sick to death tired of, continues. Because for the next year and a half, you're going to find that everything Obama does from here on out, and indeed it has been the case in the past, is going to be totally focused on how it impacts on his potential reelection effort. Everything. And this business of Obama being gutsy has really grated on me because this guy is such a pansy. He is such a pansy. I said it. I believe it. This guy was chased home from school by nerds on numerous occasions. This is not a gutsy type. Let me talk about gutsy for a minute. When Reagan said no to the Soviets at Reykjavik on missile defense, the Soviets had insisted that Reagan drop missile defense, and everybody, and I mean everybody, even people in his own administration, were really pushing for Reagan to sign a deal. Sign anything. It will look great. The people will be very pleased. You must sign something. Reagan said no. That was gutsy. That had consequences. When Reagan invaded Grenada, that was another gutsy decision. It was a gutsy call. That was one of those that could have. Who knows what could have happened? But I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Think about, for instance, Bush 1, when he put together that coalition to go get Saddam out of Kuwait, not knowing about poison gas, believing it could be used because everyone knew Saddam did have poison gas, and I would call that gutsy. I would call Bush 2 gutsy when he did the surge in Iraq in, I think, 2006, when everyone, and I mean everyone, was wanting either a drawdown or a pullout. Our illustrious Senate leader was calling the war lost. Pelosi was wanting out. It was the Democrats were insistent on America losing, and Bush 2 steps up and increases the number of troops in Iraq, changes their strategy, and that was gutsy. This business with Obama, and I think what has grated on me so much about this speech was that he says the death of bin Laden marks the most significant achievement to date in our nation's effort to defeat al-Qaeda. No way. Let me take you back to the beginning of this speech. He starts out where you know he's going to start out, with himself. He says, "Good evening. Tonight I can report." And it goes downhill from there. Now, he takes several paragraphs to describe the situation that we're in, what happened on 9/11, and he said that we learned that the 9/11 attacks were carried out by al-Qaeda. So he says, we went to war against al-Qaeda. No, sir. We went to war against terrorism. We went to war against Islamic extremism. It was Islamic terrorism that we went to war against, not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is one of many terrorist organizations with whom we should be at war. But what he's done here is change the whole dynamic of our aim in this conflict to, instead of being a war against terrorism or Islamic extremism, it now is a war against Al-Qaeda. What about the Muslim Brotherhood? What about Hamas? What about Hezbollah? What about Fatah? What about all these 1,001 other Islamic extremist groups? We should be at war with them, and we should show them the consequences. Now, I'm glad that bin Laden is dead. No question about that. But I do not like the focus on himself. He says, I directed, I was briefed, I determined. Today, at my direction, the United States launched a targeted operation. And then he says that the death of bin Laden marks the most significant achievement to date in our nation's effort. And then he says, we know about sacrifice. He says, after nearly 10 years of service, struggle, and sacrifice, we know well the cost of war. These efforts weigh on me, poor little old me, every time as commander-in-chief. I have to sign a letter. Oh, poor little you. He has to sign a letter to a bereaved family. And so I wanted to take you back and compare that speech with some truly great speeches. And I'm going to try to move through this fairly fast because we're going to be running short on time. We're coming up to another break. But when Reagan invaded Grenada, it was touch and go. He didn't come on and brag about himself at all. He bragged about the troops. He said, we knew we had little time, and the Joint Chiefs, he kept focusing attention on others, always others. The Joint Chiefs worked around the clock to come up with a plan. He said, we had to assume. The closest he gets to including himself is always with that term, we. 2 hours ago, we released the first photos. We got there just in time, and he spends most of this speech talking about why we're there, why it's in the national interest, because the Soviets and the Cubans had been in the process of setting up a base there. They had been building an airport. They have been arming their own militia there to export terrorism and extremism and communism throughout this hemisphere. And Reagan said, no way. And he made a gutsy call. One of my heroes is Winston Churchill. People that know me know that. And Churchill, it's not, I will concede, it is not really fair to compare Churchill with anyone today, much less our wonder chump in the White House, but who considers himself to be such a master orator. He's clearly never read a good speech because Churchill had some speeches. Imagine if Obama was giving these speeches, will you? Because remember when the Battle for Britain was going on, Churchill said, never in the history of warfare has so much been owed by so many to so few. Imagine Obama. Never in the history of warfare has so much been owed by so many to me. That's what he said. That's exactly what he said during his speech. Now, Churchill had a speech shortly after becoming prime minister, one of his best, and he says, and he outlines the mission, he outlines the aim, he outlines the goal. It's a monstrous tyranny that we're fighting against. And he says, if we fight, we will ride out the storm of war. We will once again be able to defend our island home and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. At any rate, this is the will of Parliament and the nation. He says, even though large tracts of Europe and many famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all its odious apparatus, all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We, did you get that? We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight, not I shall fight. If Obama was giving this speech, he would have said, I shall fight. No, we shall fight. He says, we shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields. We shall fight in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. That was a great speech. One other speech that he gave was, of course, my favorite. He said, let us, and this is the classic statement in all English language political speeches, let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties. Us, our, get it? and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth lasts for 1,000 years, men will still say this was their finest hour. Thank you for being here. Be back next week for more mirth and good cheer. Reach me at The Steve Arnold Show. Until next time, be good.